I said last podcast, since my background is in testing, and since we were talking about testing, we should have an entire podcast specifically on testing and Agile. So that's what this podcast is, testing in Agile. Testing and Agile? In Agile?
In Agile and Agile.
So I just got my CSM certification, and in class they said they don't have testers in Scrum. They only have developers. That means we can fire all our testers, right?
Absolutely. Who needs testers, right? You only need developers. That's
I didn't expect that answer.
No. Yeah. So if you're one of those people, then you really need to think through what the purpose of Scrum is. What are we delivering at the end of it?
Since a lot of people who listen to this podcast probably use Scrum, let's start with the Scrum guide. And I think actually the thing that people get in their heads right away, this weird idea that you can just get rid of all your testers because whatever, Agile doesn't have testers, or developers do testing in Agile, so you don't need dedicated testers. If this comes from the Scrum guide in any way, shape, or form, let's go ahead and read the Scrum guide right now and get this out of the way first thing in the podcast.
Yep, let's do that.
There are exactly 4 references to quality in the Scrum guide. So under the developer section, and by the way, developers in the Scrum guide means anybody on the Scrum team that is committed to creating any aspect of the usable increment.
Which might include testers?
It's anybody.
Exactly.
So instilling quality by adhering to definition of done is part of the job. So that's number one. You adhere to the definition of done. That's how you get quality in. Let's go to number 2. This is the sprint section of the Scrum guide. During the sprint, quality does not decrease. Well, that sounds pretty important.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And then the retrospective is a way to plan to increase quality and effectiveness. It's giving the purpose of the retrospective. So that's number 3 reference. And then number 4 is where it talks about a definition of done. It says it's a formal description of the state of the increment when it meets the quality measures required for the product. So we the team have decided that there is a standard of quality. We've written it down in our definition of done, and that is another way. So they just listed four mentions of quality to get the idea out of the way, to get the concept out of the way real early in this podcast. The idea that quality is a core principle. Quality never decreases because you're doing work in tiny vertical slices or because you're doing work in potentially shippable increments. Yeah. It's not that you're cutting quality to get those increments. The idea is part of your definition of done, part of your agreement together, your commitment is we're going to do stuff to get stuff out quickly, but not at the expense of cutting quality.
Yeah, oftentimes newly minted Scrum Masters kind of tend to get this wrong a little bit because they're focused on the other thing, which is we have to have a product increment at the end of the sprint. Right. We have to have it. Right. There's only 10 days. Right. So let's go ahead and do that. And they don't really put quality at the forefront of their mind. So what ends up happening is over medium term, maybe even short term, you end up accumulating some technical debt, which you never get back to. Now think about that for a sec, right? Because that is important. When was the last time your organization said, take the next sprint or 2 and just fix up tech debt? Unless the customer is screaming in their face, this doesn't happen.
I'll represent the product side in this podcast today. It's like, although I was supposed to represent the quality, like the QA side, because that's my background, on the product side, it only happens if you've made some sort of agreement with your product person to dedicate some sort of percentage inside of your capacity, whatever your capacity is. So like 25% of our capacity, we're going to deal with known problems or whatever. The reality of me saying that number is sometimes you can do that, but sometimes you just can't.
It's a Band-Aid at the end of the day, right? It's best avoided rather than have to deal with it somehow. Allocating a fixed capacity for it every sprint. For me, that looks like an opportunity cost. That 25%, whatever percentage you use, is an opportunity cost that you're incurring by not delivering something more useful, right? Because you're basically doing defect remediation at that point.
Right. The other thing in the Scrum guide, before we move off of like what the book says, it has a line that the Scrum team is cross-functional. Scrum teams are cross-functional, meaning the members have all the skills necessary to create value each sprint. So again, even if you're in an environment where you say, well, my developers do all the testing, the idea of cross-functionality is like, well, who is your expert? I mean, I understand anybody who says the if I'm going to have any empathy for the other side, like the cash-strapped startup, scrappy side of the world, who might be listening to this saying like, well, we just don't have money. Like, we'd like to do that. We just don't have money to do it. I guess you're saying I guess you're saying at that point, like we would like to be cross-functional, we just can't afford to be.
Yeah, what I'm hearing there is we don't have money, so we're going to put something out there that might be crappy, but we'll fix it later. That's not going to work, especially if you're in that startup environment where it's very important to land with your customers, right? With a product that they like. Not just simply that something that satisfies the market, but maybe even delights them, right? In that environment, if you're going to just simply pay lip service to the quality out there, how's that going to work out for you?
Well, when I was a people manager, that era of my career, especially when hiring for QA people and testers, I realized that there is a skill set that you have to sort of vet out and find in the hiring process. And those are the people that are going to be really, really good in that position. And hiring for developers and hiring for QA people you're looking for very different people potentially.
Yeah.
You know?
That's a really good point. You are looking for different people. And this, again, is sometimes misunderstood. People just say, well, testers, they can write code, sort of. They can write scripts. Mm-hmm. So they need a developer background, right? They need to know some languages and have some prowess and maybe an ID or two. I think you're right. It's a mindset issue. You need testers to have that testing mindset, which says, as we're building it, let's build quality in. The other side of it is, we'll just get to it later, and we'll inspect for it at the end.
See, that's interesting because, again, the people management side of it. This is an interesting segue. I think we should take it now because I remember when the company that I was at decided to make a real effort toward integrating automation. Like we were strictly manual testing until the point where we really started coming into some realizations that if we really were going to elevate the level of quality, we needed to integrate automation into our practices. And then we did. You know, we went about it, and I, as a manager, kind of pivoted and moved into that brave new world. But you could find somebody who has the skill set we're talking about, like whatever's on the surface and whatever they're being told is not good enough. They need to dig a little deeper. You know what I mean? They need to chase those leads when they see them. They can't help themselves. They really need to. They need to know why things don't work the way that they expect them to work. Like just being told, like, just move on is just not good enough. Like there's a mindset. So you find somebody with that mindset, but also somebody who has this deep interest in solving problems, in seeing menial tasks automated. The kind of people that they do it like once or twice, and then it bugs them that they can't just spend a little more. Like, hey, in the time that it took, I've done this twice manually. In the time I've done it twice manually, I could have figured out how to automate it. You know, finding someone with both of those mindsets. The mindset of I don't want to repeat work and I'm willing to go learn new things in order to not have to repeat this again, and the mindset of I'm really bugged by not understanding why things are the way they are. I need to dig into the system and figure it out. Both those mindsets together, you can find that and develop it. I don't know if it's more difficult or less. I probably could think about that and have that as a separate session. You know, are your QA analysts the same mindset of your QA engineers? Because QA engineers have a different career track of like software SDET, the software developer and test type of career track. Anyway, like we're getting kind of off tangent, but it was an interesting segue because I've specifically in my role of people leadership in QA and testing, I can tell you that those are different mindsets that you have to find. Absolutely,
for sure they are, right? So that kind of hound dog mentality, go figure out what's wrong, go keep sniffing, right, until you figure out what's wrong, as opposed to kind of just say, hey, something's wrong, throw it back at the developer that worked on it last. That's really that junior level mentality. So once people mature beyond that, they're looking at holistically why this is happening. Yeah. And then to your point, they get frustrated at having to do things manually, and they learn the skills to automate. And I think it's a natural progression for somebody who is a manual tester to want to automate things, and that should be encouraged as much as possible. It used to be the case where people carried both skill sets on a team. Like we have an automation tester, but we also have manual testers, right? That's an overhead. I think it's also a function of maturity. I think lately what I'm seeing is you have a QA person who is obviously very well versed on how to test manually, but they're also an automation person. They write automation scripts, and they get engaged early on with developers to the point where they really don't want to wait until something is thrown over the wall at them. So right after the sprint starts, they huddle up with the developers and say, what are we doing, right? Let me take some of these automation pieces and start writing that. Or even better, let me write some of these unit tests for you. You write others and we can kind of work together, aka. And once they do that for a little while, you can start seeing more developers and more testing type folks get engaged in that and move away from pair to mob programming, where everybody owns everything. And I know this doesn't often sit well with like the world where they want to assign things and have one net to choke type of scenario. But these teams are doing really, really well. So there's something going on there.
To go straight into the idea of this category, that the testing mindset is different than the typical developer's mindset. Is that like an overblown statement? Is that like an overused statement? Or is that actually kind of true?
No, I think it's true. And here's the reason why. I've seen the other side, which is to say, they get something thrown at them. The developer says, I've assigned this to you, Fred or Mary, right? Go test this. And they test it, and the first thing that falls over, they say, oh, well, this doesn't work. And they assign it back at them, right? I've seen that. I call it the ping pong game, right? But the other side is the tester isn't looking to ascribe blame. They're looking to see what was missed, and then they're looking to educate the team as a whole to say, if we work differently, we can avoid this in the future. So then what happens is you really evolve along that maturity curve, and they're helping the process become better over time.
This is part of how do QA people and or testers add quality to the product. One of my gripes with people who think that they can operate with like one tester for 10 developers or whatever, you know what I mean? Like a weird ratios like that. And I'm not going to get into ratios in the podcast because like every company is a little bit different on what your ratio can be, right? If you have a tester, you already talked about sitting down and peering with them to write your, even if all your tests are 100% of your tests are automated, maybe not 100, but if your company is dedicated to automation, your testers can help unburden the developer from having to think about tests in addition to all the rest of the things that they're thinking about. So the tester can be completely focused on how are we going to test this, and the developer is focused completely on how are we going to code and create this, and where are all the edge cases, and where are all the paths, the little perpendicular paths where that can take us off course. And then sitting together, you're truly exploring all of the options and knocking it out when it's first coded. Because like I think there really shouldn't be any pushback on the concept that fixing something at the time of its first coding is the least expensive method of solving problems, as opposed to catching defects when they're out in production and then bringing them back in, taking a section of our velocity and dedicating it to solve that problem or go around that technical debt or whatever. Yeah. I mean, that's the most expensive. After it's already in production, already in a branch, already in the release that went to prod, dealing with a change, that's the most expensive way. Just like, we're going to develop this new website and put it out and see if customers like it. That's the most expensive way of testing if your idea is good or crap.
I mean, this has already been proven, so yeah, I think we can kind of move beyond that, right? Yeah. It's an order of magnitude cheaper to fix it at the source than later. What people don't think about is the ancillary things. It's not just that the customer's finding this thing and you're fixing it later and there's this opportunity cost I mentioned earlier. It's the rep damage. Your company has already, and your product has already suffered rep damage, reputation damage, right? When the customer finds something, they're already not happy about it. So you can't really put a value on that. So I think you need to think about those things as well. Mm-hmm. But yeah, to your point about freeing up the developers from the burden of thinking about testing and doing testing, etc., in the bigger picture, not just unit tests, stuff like that. There's some new things here now, right? So lately, what we're seeing is testers focusing on taking a piece of functionality and then putting it through load testing or performance testing or scalability, those kinds of things.
Or any NFR.
Yeah, exactly. So it's freeing up your development folks to say, just get it working and then let us see how well. It's the elasticity in the product that they're testing, right? And when they reach a limit, you've now learned something. Yeah. Is it good enough? Maybe it's good enough. Maybe you're only expecting 100,000 people to hit this thing, right, at a time. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's 1 million plus.
Right.
So you've found this out ahead of time before it's rolled out. But it's not your developer doing this, because if they were doing that, it would take them a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
They may even have to learn new tools, new skill sets perhaps, to a lesser degree, but still. So these QA folks, to me, QA and developers jointly own the delivery of the sprint, right? That sprint goal is owned jointly by both of them.
I'm glad we're here, because this is another one pulled straight from the headlines. Like, straight from the headlines. This plot was written. I worked on a mobile app one time that had 100,000 concurrent users. There was like 2 million registered users in the system, but you had about 100,000. So like that's like 5%. Yeah, 5% of the users in the system were concurrent users, but still 100,000 people using your mobile app at one time. That's a lot.
It's a lot. Yeah,
It all went to one central database, and development, every single time that development got to choose, I'd rather test all my functional stuff. I want to make sure that my checkbox is a checkbox and it works and it saves a setting in the database. And why would we ever load test, these things?
That's what the users are for.
Well, I mean, this is where product comes in. This is where having dedicated QA people and testers can help product put out a quality product, because product probably has, especially if you're product people. I often have to, at this stage of my career, I'm going into September? Yeah, going into the 19th year of working in development, software development. I often have to stop and remember that connecting to the business is the most important thing to business people.
Right.
I mean, not until it comes time to actually code and create a feature, then my experience is the most important thing, because they're like, Brian, go figure out how to get this thing implemented. You know what I mean? 90% of the time, it's go figure out how to get this thing implemented. But the other 10% of the time is, oh my goodness, everyone's fighting, because they run into something like this is our app is successful, now we're in trouble, because no one ever thought that 100,000 people would be clicking on our mobile app at any one point together at the same point in time. 100,000 people would be. Success is now our biggest enemy, and now your testers are sitting back kind of like, because you probably have a work item in your system that they've opened that says, hey, when you scale over this amount, the servers fall over. And because your product and your testers and your development are not all speaking the same language, you don't have what the end user needs directly in sight. You know what I mean? Because you're not optimized. A lot of companies are not optimized for the end user. Again, this is just from what I've seen in my career. Development likes to optimize for getting things out and off of their plate as fast as possible, so they can say, well, you're not waiting on us.
They like to optimize a deadline. Is what it boils down.
QA likes to optimize to say, we don't have anything coming back on us to say that there's dings on the product, that the quality is bad, because that comes directly back on us. And then I don't even know what product optimizes for. You're buying yachts, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, but you made a good point when you started talking about this point, which is really who represents the voice of the customer when you're actually working on the product at that point. Isn't it better to find it there? So if you didn't know about the product scope of this, 100,000 people will be concurrently hitting this. That's one thing. It's a miss. You didn't know about it. So there's a miss there. But if you knew potentially there might be, then that's where your testers could say, let's write some automation and let's create an environment where we can hit this thing really hard and see if it will even stand upright when 100,000 people do it. The alternative to that is muddle through. Go change a pool value somewhere. That's not going to work for you.
Well, I mean, the idea is that your QA people, your testers in this case, become an additional avenue of feedback to your developers. Like the product manager may not know. Let's stay in the mobile app world for a second. Yeah. Typically, mobile apps will access the servers via an API. So an API, an endpoint has been written for the mobile application to do a specific operation, whatever it is. Load the widget for how many items I have in my inventory today, or whatever. I don't know. I'm making up stuff. And that's fine. But if you're a tester and you're using Postman or using JMeter or using some API testing tool, and you load up a test and you just hammer the server with 100,000 connections within 3 seconds of each other, the developers might say, like, why would you do that? Why would you ever run a test like that? Said many developers to me in my career many times.
All the time.
Many times.
I concur
why
with
would
that.
you do that? I mean, the arbiter in that case is now the product person to say, hey, listen, I'm running these tests, but development is saying, why would you do that? It's not realistic. Maybe that's not written down in any of your requirements. Maybe there is no work item in any system you're using. Any system. It could be a good system. It could be a bad system. It could be Jira.
Could be any system.
Could be any system. There's no work item that says make the system perform under 100,000 concurrent users. I've been in this environment too, where you don't have access to go look at production. You don't have access to go look at production's logs, to go log in with read-only to production's database. Maybe you have like real secure IT policies or whatever, and you can't go look at those systems. Like you built the system, but now that it's in production, you don't have, you're not a big enough boy to go look at them.
I shake my head sideways when I come across those, but you're right, they're out there, right? These situations. Like, why would you not have your testers look at that stuff? Because it's reality.
They certainly are, but I mean, like if the tester can't look at it, and when we're going to pretend for a second in this example, the tester is somewhat technical, like what are the chances the product manager is going to know to go look? Yeah, exactly.
They don't go through combing through log files, right?
Well, this is, I mean, the interesting point about me in my career where I am now is I will go push to look at that stuff, and I will get glances from the side of people's eyes and be like, "What is this product manager trying to get API access, or trying to get access to our Splunk logs or Elastic logs or whatever? Like, why do you need this?
You need data?
Like, well, no. I'd like to know how users are using the system.
Yeah,
and you can make a valid point by saying, well, if you want to know how users are using the system, you should go ask the users. And listen, that is valid. That is valid. But also, you have data in the system. Why is that not exposed to me? I should be able to see that.
Listen, totally agree with that. So you can't really go and ask 100,000 of your users to see if they're all going to hit the endpoint at exactly the same time. That's just not realistic. However, to your point, that data's there. It's the log.
It's there.
Assuming you're logging stuff, right? So go look at your Splunk log, go look at your Datadog or whatever it is that you're using, and figure that out. One thing I want to talk about here is that little gap in between those scenarios, which is look at that, and then they say, hey, listen, we had 20,000 users get on at the same time, and it's fine. Everything worked great.
Yeah.
So let's just say we may have 40, double that. We're fine, right? It's not validated. Because that 40, it just comes out of the air. Somebody just makes that up and they go, it was 20, we'll just double it because there's safety in numbers, right? So even if twice as many users got on a Saturday, we'll be fine. And then one day it goes belly up because 6 times the number of users went on. You didn't validate the actual scope of your product ahead of time.
What happened at a company I was at one time is there actually was a bug in the mobile app. Like super, super, super deep in the mobile app. And the testers would have had to really have a very test that happened at regular intervals, like automated regular intervals to expose this, because they made a change in the mobile app that every time someone loaded a particular screen, I don't remember what screen it was, it made too many requests to the server. So that 100,000 concurrent connections basically turned into an infinite number of connections, and the database that was at the heart of the system, it didn't crash. What it did was it queued, because of the nature of that database, that particular technology, it queued up all of those requests.
So the users experience latency, basically.
So the users, extreme latency, because the normal requests were like, whatever, 100,000 actions to the database, but basically the system couldn't handle 10 times volume. But had we load tested the system at 10x, we would have, first of all, we were caught by surprise in that situation, right? Because it was a bug.
Sure.
We fixed a bug, problem went away. But for all the users that were not on the buggy version, or were not on the platform that had the bug, they got impacted because all this traffic came into the database that all the applications went to. So again, like I bring this up because of 2 reasons. Because number one, NFRs are very difficult to deal with without testers kind of lobbying for them, because they're usually the people with that mindset that says, oh, what happens when we have twice as many normal users? What happens if it does? Oh, well, that's never happened before, so don't worry about it. Well, okay, well, at least let's talk about it though, right? Let's at least talk about it. Right? Oh, no, we don't have time to talk about it. We're busy. We got all these features to implement, right? The other side of this is it's an additional avenue for feedback, kind of like I said before. It's an additional avenue for feedback to the developers that maybe they don't get. Like maybe the developers get feedback from executives. Maybe they get feedback from their development managers and leads and stuff like that. Maybe they get feedback from the product manager, but maybe they don't get this additional feedback from other people that are highly technical as well, saying, hey, maybe we should talk about this scenario.
Yeah, definitely. I have something similar to share in a situation where the connections were being not terminated properly. So you would have the pool was being used up all the time, right?
Yeah.
And people would keep trying because people are people, right? They would just say, "Oh, it didn't work. Well, try it again, refresh." Well, that just makes matters worse. And a developer doing their job, they're not going to catch that, right? All they're going to do is make sure that a singular test works.
Well, they might not even have access to know that
the
pooling the memory on the pooling connections is growing and growing and growing.
That's right.
They might not even have access to see, because they don't have access to those monitors because of corporate permissions or whatever, security.
And politics and all of that. Yeah, exactly. So there's that. When we encountered a situation similar to what you just highlighted, it wasn't a case of the customer experiencing latency, which is pretty bad, because then what follows after that is timeouts and whatever else, and they're going to try again and again, right? It was the database went into a thrashing mode, and that was terrible, right? And they were logging, so the log file grew to the point where it filled up. I mean, it was just disaster after disaster. So a lot of these things that we're highlighting, born from experience, the developers aren't going to catch for whatever reason. There are many reasons why. But your testers could catch those, and probably should, right? If they were given the right permissions, etc. Yeah, exactly. So I think that alone tells you, if you're not exposing these kinds of bad experiences to your customers, that's a good thing, surely, right? I mean, because the flip side is you do, and the customers get really teed off because they get timed out on, they try again, they get timed out on, right? All of that. The server is not available today, please try again later. It's like, no, I need this now. So a net on all this is your product folks aren't necessarily going to be able to scope to that level of technical availability, if you like, to the customer, right? This is where a combination of product and testers can really thrive.
Yeah. Well, the product people really could benefit from having testers on the team, because they may, let me think about this, like under the guise of building a quality system for customers, the testers may bring up things that development may not think about bringing up, just from the perspective of, like what I said earlier, is like development is concerned with just getting things out the door as fast as possible and moving on to the next thing, because especially in shops where like a development lead and a product manager kind of go off in a corner and create a series of like, oh, we got to have feature X and feature Y and feature Z and just code these team. We haven't even entertained the idea in this podcast of what happens when different segments are offshored. We offshore development of these features, and when we bring them back in house, they need to go through. So we haven't entertained the idea that the people writing the code and writing the features and the people testing them are separated by walls, because that's a whole different, like it
is,
opportunity for issues.
For sure, that's what leads to this, right? So it's like the blame culture, So I agree with that. I think one of the things I wanted to kind of just finish up this topic with is, if you have these symptoms in your company, on your product, etc., and you don't have that same level of respect for testers, they're not there, they're not given enough rope to work with, etc., think about that. Right? See if you can connect some of the dots, because really your customers don't care who's doing the work. All they care about is getting the work of the right quality at the right time. So a couple of the terms I want to put out here: fitness for purpose. This doesn't mean that your product has to be 100% bug free. It just has to be fit for purpose.
Right.
So the bugs are there. Maybe share them with your customers if they're not severe enough, and say, here's what we got. Do we want to wait till these are fixed? Which ones of these should be fixed? What's next, now, later? And have that discussion. Then they're not so surprised, right? They're not going to write bad reviews necessarily, because you've engaged them in the discussion. So that's one term, fitness for purpose. And then the other one, for those of you that are involved in providing services, etc., is grade of service. I learned this a long time ago when I was working in telecom.
Sure.
A service could be up, right? But it doesn't perform as well. So grade of service is really talking about the quality. If you think about simple things like you pick up a landline and you're talking to somebody, and the conversation is, the connection is there, first of all, right? It's a solid connection. However, you're hearing static sometimes. Sometimes there's the occasional dropout. The grade of service suffers right there, right? So that's really what I'm talking about. The service is up, so you can check that box, right? And so the developers can say, look, it's working. The testers can say, yeah, we tested it, it works. Ask the customer.
If you go searching for this topic around the internet, I think you'll encounter shift left testing. And like, again, shift left is like one of those terms that is it's a buzzword. It's meaningless. It means nothing. But my product manager hat to this, I would not put a hat on and mess up my wonderful hair. I have a good hair day. It like you're aside if your testers, your QA people are helping product represent the needs of the users, like you're shifting left. The idea is you're shifting to how can I make sure this new feature benefits users? And if that's what you're going into your testing, and before the feature is even coded, you're talking to the development team, you're talking to your product manager, you know what I mean? Like when you're refinements or sprint planning or whatever, that is, to me, when people say shift left, that's what I think of when people say that.
Totally agree. I, on the other hand, never have a bad hair day. But besides that, so I agree with that, right? As early as possible, shift left. Hey, listen, is there a reason why your testers aren't involved in the very early discussions with your UX folks? Right? They should be there. Oftentimes I hear the opposite, though. I hear, well, there's nothing for the testers to do yet. No. We haven't even written code yet.
No.
I'm like, but that's the perfect time to bring them in.
When I do sprint reviews, for example, I'm demoing some features. Like, I think a lot of times the perfect people to review those items and to demonstrate them to the users are the testers, because usually they're in an environment that's not the development environment where where all the data and everything is showing is like, well, this data is kind of fake and whatever, because usually the testers are operating in some kind of middle ground stage environment, and if they're in the environments where they've been in production demonstrating the feature, they have some sort of test user or test data or test account that's in production, so it looks like real data. And which is the best case scenario, by the way. Like I'm a big fan of testing in production because I'm reckless. That's why. Because I like but
there's nothing like reality.
I'm like I was at a company one time where I was like, where does your sales people demo from? Oh, well, they have a whole sales account customer and everything that has fake data. And everything. I was like, well, that seems like a great place for QA to test in production. Like, assuming that you have automation that fires in every environment, why can't you just fire the automation to look for certain things as criteria for success in the different environments? Like, if you have a dev environment, you probably have some data in there. If you have a middle ground stage environment or something like that, you probably have some data there. And if you have a production environment, you certainly have data there. You can code the automation to look for certain flags, certain triggers or whatever, to say test successful or not. Yep. So it shouldn't be like testing, quote, testing in production. Shouldn't be this big thing. If you're saying shift your testing left, first of all, that terminology is meaningless to me. Yeah. What I hear when I hear that is your product people, whoever's, quote, writing requirements, should be engaging the testers at the time where the creation is happening. I think of people that are like, like all the people that we like watch TikToks where they're like, they meet with their development manager and they cook up requirements and nobody's in the room. It's just them two, right? Like, okay, you should at least have somebody involved when the requirements are being vetted. If it's in front of a customer, or if it's in front of your team, or if you have both at the same time, which is ideal. You want to have your customer in the room with your team and your tester and your product manager, saying, hey, you asked for this, you say this will relieve your pain point, let's talk about it. Your tester can be there to ask questions, to listen to the back and forth, and can automatically like their brain is already going into, how can I test that what we're about to create fulfills every issue that you're pointing out? It fixes every problem that you're claiming to have. How can I already start to think about testing this? And the earlier they start with that, again, when we go into coding, they can be sitting with your developer, they can be saying, hey, these are the negative scenarios, these are if you're doing test-driven development or whatever, like, I don't know what you're doing, but if you're doing test-driven development, they were already in all the conversations that brought the work item into development. You can start from the best scenario.
But here's the thing, those people that are watching this or listening to this that just Though those testers that just stop at testing with synthetic data, yeah, you're missing something there, right? Because there's nothing like testing in production. That is the acid test right there. So if you have various environments that you're pushing your code across, dev, test, QA, whatever, stage, and then finally production, there's no reason why you can't avail yourself to the latest techniques that you can trigger all of these thousands of automations every minute, right? Yeah. Literally. And use that to your advantage. The other thing is then look towards progressing to the point where you don't need those environments. Well, which is that blue-green scenario.
The last thing that I had that I wanted to talk about was automation.
Yeah.
And like you started down this road to talk about testing in production is a dirty word to a lot of people. But if you have CI/CD practices in place, it shouldn't matter what environment it is. If you have CI/CD in place and you have tests that run as part of that automation, when your release process goes off, you are testing in production. You're testing in every environment that you run those CI/CD integrated tests. So it shouldn't be a dirty word to test in production or dev or stage or QA or whatever environment you have. Those tests should be standardized, and you should try to go to a place where I've been to this place many, many times in my career in the maturity of test automation at places I've been at, where they become so secure in their test automation that they say, because especially if you're doing UI automation, like front end automation, there's only so many UI front end that you can run. Like if you're running Selenium tests, for example, there's only so many tests you can run. Every additional test, it requires more time, like seconds and minutes, to run more additional tests. So you eventually start looking through your test library to say, we haven't changed this functionality in so long or whatever. We're just going to disable this test because we're just going to take it on faith that it runs successfully, and we want our automation to clear in a certain amount of time. We want to be able to run our automated battery of tests and have it clear in 2 hours. I think about a front end mobile automation. You have a mobile app, you've changed some stuff, you want to release a new application into the app store for users, and it runs, and your backend tests grab the application, download it from the app store, register a new user, do some stuff, click some things through the application. Front end testing is some of the most expensive testing you can do. Right. So in this example that I'm talking about now, is you really need to put your money where the most valuable tests are, and figure out that we used to call it critical path back in the day. Yeah, that still exists. Critical path still exists in testing. I don't know how I got on this topic, but here we are on this topic of critical path testing.
Cool. Well, I learned something there. Critical path is still a thing.
It's still relevant. It's still an elephant. I got nothing. Man.
I think we should wrap up by just saying, if you are testing in production, you either have a lot of faith, you have good processes in place. No. I stopped at either, so you can't go to or.
Or you're a product manager, because I mess with my team all the time and say I only test in production, but also my team only gives me access to production, so
I don't know, but when I do, I see a meme coming here. No, listen, the ultimate for me is save your money and don't spin up all these wicked environments everywhere, because they are a money sap. Just have dev and production. You don't need UAT. Yes, you don't need UAT, right? In production, your new latest code is in there, wrapped around a feature toggle, and nobody's any the wiser because it's turned off. Get your testers to test that using automation in combination with all the regression that goes therewith. And if it passes, guess what? It's solid, right? Flip that toggle and your customers are happy. If not, keep that toggle unflipped, switched off, and work on the feature until it works. So there you go. That's what I need to say about blue-green deployments rather than multiple environments everywhere.
I mean, at the point where you have blue-green deployments, you're probably advanced enough where you can fly through a lot of the concepts that we've talked about.
Yeah.
At the point where you've implemented the most difficult part, you might as well roll your tests into it at that point. There's really not a reason not to. I mean,
the flip side of that, I agree. But the flip side of that is, how can the likes of Amazon roll out new functionality, they're truly global, right? You don't have the opportunity to say, well, this is production and this is whatever, and we're going to have something deployed to production, which usually involves a downtime, because what are you going to do? Penalize people in Japan that are using Amazon or people in Hawaii, right? No, it's there, and it's through blue-green that they do that, right? And they take, they could take advantage of the feature toggle functionality too. So they release to production many times an hour. You heard that right, an hour. And many teams I've worked with struggle to release something every sprint, let alone an hour, right? How is that possible? Why can they do that? What do they know that we don't know?
Well, I mean, like the teams that I work with, ever since I've been exclusively in product, I insist on real-time deployment. I insist on one feature, one change request, one deployment to production. Like I insist on real-time deployment to production. Like I don't want to deploy to production like once every Wednesday or something like that. I don't think that helps anyone. I don't think that's the best thing for customer
delight.
Yeah, I don't think that's the best thing for customer delight. I don't think that's the best thing, honestly, for the careers of the team members. To be honest, I don't think that's. I think the company should figure out how to say one change request, whatever that is, story, bug, one single story in Jira or whatever ALM you're using, whatever that is, it should be able to go to production by itself.
Absolutely.
And also immediately go out in a way where it doesn't impact anybody. Like we should be able to release in a way where the users don't really know that the software is changing underneath them.
Absolutely.
This is like a cost of doing business, like minor, in my opinion anyway. Maybe other people have other opinions. Figuring out how to do this in an automatic manner. There's so many tools and so many infrastructures that just do this automatically without impacting the user. That I remember the early part of my career where you had to take downtime, had to bring servers down, had to put up a splash page that says the site is currently down for maintenance or whatever.
Yeah,
there's so many tools
gone now. They should be gone.
Theoretically, should be gone. Yeah.
There's no reason why they shouldn't be gone. Let me put it that way, right?
Yeah.
The tools are available to you now. That idea of carving a piece of functionality so small that it's just one thing, whether it's something new, whether it's a bug fix or whatever, because one times one always equals one.
Again, since I'm like the technical person in product now, I know that I can just reject releases that have only one work item in them until a point where I get to like a release that has 5-6 work items or 10 work items, 7 of which are related to the same web page or whatever. And I'll say, well, I'll take that release and ignore the rest of them. But I, the business, in making that determination to say, I want to go to production now.
You decide when.
Right, yeah.
And with what as well, right?
Right, yeah.
Yeah, I like that, yeah.
Well, it's an opportunity for me to communicate out to my stakeholders of we made a build now, and here's what you can see. I mean, it would be better. I certainly agree. It would be better to just, as soon as my development team is done with features, just send them out. Literally as soon as they're done. And then the communication becomes a bunch of little micro communications as opposed to one release announcement type of deal.
Right.
You know what I mean? And at this point, we're on to another topic of like announcing features and stakeholder communication and whatnot. That's not really the point of this podcast. This podcast is about testing. Although your testers can, if they're enabled the right way, they can have a big impact on product's ability to communicate out to users.
For sure. Absolutely agree. Yeah. I think that might be a wrap for us today. All right. So let us know how your teams are doing with your testing down in the comments below, and like and subscribe that button.